Good morning, Creaster Ray. We're going to talk about imperialism today, and I really want this to be a practice day where I will tell the story, then you pause the video and you tell the story. So once again, we're going to practice where I tell it, you pause, you tell it to get ready for your video for a standard on Friday. So American imperialism, remember the definition of imperialism is to conquer or force political, economic, or cultural control over another country. 3 reasons why Americans imperialized. 1, America was beginning to make more than they could sell to their own markets, so they needed extra markets. They wanted expanded markets. They wanted other countries to sell to. 2, they wanted to quote unquote civilize the savage, right? Spread white Christian culture. And 3, they needed places to stop and refuel or military bases on their way to travel to far off destinations. So go ahead and pause the video and try to define imperialism and give 3 reasons why Americans engaged in it. Pause. Great, you're back. So today we're going to talk about examples of American imperialism. The 4 most famous are Hawaii, the Spanish-American War, China, and the Panama Canal. So let's begin with Hawaii. In Hawaii, many white Americans lived there, and they made their money off of sugar. And the white Americans were unhappy because Hawaii was not part of the U.S. So when they would ship their sugar to sell in the U.S., they had to pay a tariff. Remember, a tariff is a tax on a foreign good. So the white Americans in Hawaii, their goal was to annex Hawaii. They wanted to make it part of the U.S. so they would have greater profits. They wouldn't have to pay a tax to sell their sugar in the U.S. So they banded together and they overthrew Queen Liliuokalani. So one more time, white Americans wanted to not pay tariffs on sugar. So their goal was to annex Hawaii, to make it part of the U.S., to get rid of that tax, that foreign tax. So they overthrew Queen Liliuokalani to achieve that goal. Pause the video and tell that story yourself. We're back. Let's talk about the Spanish-American War. It's called the Spanish-American War, but it's really about Cuba and their quest to get rid of Spain. So Cuba had been colonized by Spain. Remember, Cubans speak Spanish. It's kind of a lasting legacy of colonization. Cuba wanted help from the U.S. At the same time in the U.S., this yellow press was really popular in the U.S. Newspapers would write these sensational, exaggerated stories to get people excited or enraged by the news to sell more papers. So when they would report on Cuba, they would sensationalize or exaggerate. And the yellow press would tell stories of the Spanish taking Cuban babies and throwing them to sharks to feed the sharks. And it really enraged Americans. They thought the Spanish were incredibly unjust and they wanted to help the Cubans in their war. But many were still hesitant to go to war. But America had a ship docked in Cuba, and it was called the USS Maine. And one day, the USS Maine exploded. And the yellow press jumped on again, and they said, oh my gosh, Spain has a secret weapon. They're after us. We have to help the Cubans because the Spanish are unjust to them, and now they're attacking us. Well, we know now, looking back at history, that this was not true. The USS Maine, it was an accidental explosion caused by an American sailor on board. But the war begins. America decides to help Cuba overthrow Spain, and it's known as the Splendid Little War because it passes so quickly. They finished the war in 3 months. Less than 400 people died, only 385 people died, and so many Americans were like, wow, this was so easy. Wasn't this easy to conquer another country? And so when they won the Spanish-American War and they helped the Cubans free themselves from Spain, rather than letting Cuba be independent, they kept all the places that Spain had held before. They kept part of Cuba, kept Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico. So even though the Americans said it was a war to beat the Spanish and to free Cuba, the U.S. kept Cuba, Guam, Philippines, and Puerto Rico after they helped the Cubans kick Spain out. So pause the video and tell yourself the story of the Spanish-American War. We're back. China. China was a huge market, right? We know that China has a very, very large population. Americans were nervous that they would not be able to sell their products there because so many European countries were already staking claims. So the U.S. negotiated with other European countries. You can see that picture of the guy with the pointy hat is a German. You see Uncle Sam in the striped pants. You see the British next to the Uncle Sam. All of these people, they wanted part of China to grow rich. And so the U.S. negotiated with Europe, and they said that they would share, that it would be an open door, that all of Europe and the U.S. could share with China equally, and therefore they could all profit off of China. So pause the video and tell yourself the story of China. Last but not least, we're back with the Panama Canal. Teddy Roosevelt is now president. McKinley had been president during the Spanish-American War, but Teddy Roosevelt is now president. And he wants to reduce travel time. So if you look at that picture, you see New York City. To get to San Francisco, you used to have to go all the way around South America for a trip of 13,000 miles. He wanted to make it less than half by building a canal, so cutting through a country in Central America to shorten the trip. Well, at this time, there was a group that called themselves Panamanians in Colombia, and the Panamanians wanted to be independent of Colombia. So at first, Teddy Roosevelt offered to Colombia, hey, can we just buy a part of Colombia and we can build our canal? And Colombia said no. Since they said no, Teddy Roosevelt went to the Panamanians of Colombia and said, I heard you want to be independent. I will help you break away from your country if you promise to let me build my canal. And so that is how the country of Panama came to be. The U.S. helped the Panamanians rebel against their government. They became independent. And then the U.S. built a canal to be able to ship their products in a much quicker fashion and save money. Pause now and tell yourself the story of the Panama Canal. Okay, good job, juniors. You're all finished with this practice. Hopefully you've done it. I would do it several times to make sure you know it well, to get ready for Thursday and Friday. And don't forget to SCAP the document on Schoology. Take good care. Bye-bye.